Clay introduced on the Senate floor a compromise on January 29, 1850. The compromise consisted of 6 separate bills that called for 1. California to be admitted as a state without reference to slavery. 2. Territorial governments of the remaining portion of the Mexican addition to be organized without congressional restriction on slavery. Popular vote would resolve the question in the territories. 3. The boundary of Texas would be resolved. 4. The debts of Texas would be assumed by the United States so long as Texas relinquished claims to any part of New Mexico. 5. Slavery would not be abolished in the District of Columbia without the consent of the people of Maryland and those living in the District of Columbia, and without just compensation to slave owners. 6. The slave trade would be abolished in the District of Columbia. 7. A more effective fugitive slave law would be enacted. And 8. Congress would acknowledge it had no power to interfere in the interstate slave trade.
Well, the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 is one of the most contentious issues between North and South. It's part of the Compromise of 1850, which included some pro-Northern and some pro-Southern measures, and this was the most important pro-Southern part of the compromise. Now, the right of Southerners to get back their fugitive slaves is in the Constitution, so there's no doubt about that. The Constitution would never have been ratified in the first place by the South if it didn't include a clause saying that these, doesn't use the word slave, it used persons held to labor, but everyone knew who they were talking about. They have a right to get them back. This is very important because it makes the whole country responsible for policing the slave system of the South. The northern states can abolish slavery, as they will do, but they cannot get out of their responsibility for, at least under the Constitution, for recognizing the legitimacy of slavery in the South and treating fugitive slaves as criminals, basically, who have to be returned.
On the afternoon of May 22, 1856, Preston Smith Brooks, a Democratic congressman from South Carolina, physically attacked Senator Charles Sumner of Massachusetts in the Senate chambers, hitting him on the head with his thick cane. These acts, in turn, inspired John Brown to lead a group of men in Kansas Territory on an attack at pro-slavery settlement at Osawatomie Creek. During the night of May 24th, the group, which included 4 of Brown's sons, led 5 pro-slavery men from their homes and hacked them to death with broadswords. Brown's men let Jerome Glanville and James Harris return home to the cabin of Harris. In August, thousands of pro-slavery men formed into armies and marched into Kansas. That same month, Brown and several of his followers engaged 400 pro-slavery soldiers in the Battle of Osawatomie. The hostiles raged for another 2 months until Brown departed the Kansas Territory and a new territorial governor, John W. Geary, took office and managed to prevail upon both sides for peace. This was followed by a fragile peace broken by intermittent violence outbreaks for 2 more years. The last major outbreak of violence was touched off by the Marias Days Cygnus massacre in 1858, where border ruffians killed 5 freemen.
All of these are the kind of things that politicians are able to hammer out a compromise. The issue that keeps coming back that they cannot find a compromise on is the issue of slavery. All the other differences, and they were certainly abundant between North and South, could have been worked out, could have been negotiated. They didn't provoke an emotional response. Slavery did.
As the United States expanded westward, the country's physical growth came to endanger its very existence. With each new state came the threat that the delicate balance of 1819 would be upset. When the Mexican War ended in 1848, the United States gained vast territories south of the Mason-Dixon line.
The great irony to emerge from the Mexican War was the fact that the American victory almost destroyed the United States as a nation, and once again the root cause was slavery.
In 1856, John C. Fremont became the first Republican candidate for president on a platform denouncing the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the Fugitive Slave Law. Though he was defeated by Democrat James Buchanan, the election clearly demonstrated the sharp political divisions in the country. Northerners voted for Fremont. Southerners voted for Buchanan. By the time the voters went to the polls in 1860, the rift between North and South would prove too wide a gulf for any political party to bridge.
Lincoln's approach to slavery in the territories was considered radical in the South. So they were absolutely terrified that if he were elected president, their entire way of life would be destroyed.
Lincoln's election repelled the South and set the stage for rebellion.